Good evening from Bali. This 4th of July, Independence Day, let us take this as a catalyst to begin the celebrations of Rio Plus 30 and chart the next 20 to 30 years journey of commitment to make sustainable development a reality worldwide. Now, the three questions I see. What is your advice and opinion on the process, failures, achievements, and learning from making progress in the future? What will it take to overcome the predicament? Which concrete actions are needed, and what will it take? What are your ideas and initiatives over the next 30 years to 2052? So beginning with that, let me now make this short presentation, so let us reflect on the last 50 years journey of sustainable development. Three questions come to my mind. Where have we been? Where are we? And where must we go? I speak personally as I have been a witness and a contributor to the 3 World Summits of Sustainable Development, 4 World Food Security Summits, Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, Earth Charter, Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, Climate 2030, and a host of many conferences and meetings. The Global Sustainable Development Summit's agendas and contents were prepared by teams of credible science expertise from around the world in their preparatory meetings. The 3 summits, Stockholm 72, Rio 92, and Johannesburg 2002, all 3 endorsed agendas and promised action, but in all cases failed to deliver the means of implementation. Similarly, for development goals, targets were time-bound targets were set, but in almost all cases, they were not delivered, whether it was poverty or hunger or health for all, etc. And meanwhile, human rights and nature rights are being violated every day, everywhere. Global development issues need global actions through global partnerships. And such global partnerships have not materialized as governments remain preoccupied perpetually with re-election and self-national interest, and businesses are focused on more and more profits. We also have yet to embrace systems thinking for systemic actions, because the complexities and critical interlinkages need to be taken into account. For example, poverty, hunger, health are intertwined. Also, the common sense Rio principles of common but differential responsibility, polluter pays, precautionary principle. Nobody would argue against it. They were all endorsed, but not embraced. Second question, where are we? Sadly, the world today is of self-interest and nationalism. COVID-19 vaccine with limited clinic trials. Long COVID affects 30% of the population in many countries. When you have this figure for the US, you know it's much worse elsewhere. Will pandemics come to haunt us worldwide for decades? Nuclear threats for territorial gains puts at risk principles of sovereignty, a recipe of many regional conflicts ahead. And most of all, rising inflation, which is causing economic destitution and hunger the world over. Human divisiveness and the widening rich and poor inequities, as well as escalating adoption of modern lifestyles of materialism, greed, power, that is creating waste and pollution, the root cause of sustainable development imperative we are facing. Why is there little discussion on consumption? Is it political suicide to talk about it? Is it against business goals of more consumption for more profits? We are halfway to 2030 goals. We have yet to see adequate progress in SDGs 2030 and climate 2030. And meanwhile, degradation of nature intensifies unabated. So where must we go? The Rio 92 Agenda 21 and the Earth Summit Rio principles are still the best foundation and the only comprehensive base to create a sustainable, humane world in harmony with nature. It is unlikely we will have future World Sustainability Summits. Also, after 50 years, can we continue to rely on governments and business to deliver the imperative? It is time, or is it time for citizen movements to mobilize the power of their votes and wallets to force change? The Earth Odyssey 5 webinars call on governments, business, scientists, civil society, women who are excluded from the decision-making tables, empowering the youth who will be leaders in a matter of years, and mobilizing the news and social media, which has the potential to spread the message of the need for sustainable development. We have no more than 30 to 50 years, the lifespan of the youth alive today, for actions to create a sustainable world, lest we lose the battle to save ourselves, save our one world, save our one world, which is the only place in the universe thus far known to support life. Let us all awaken in this defining moment worldwide. Let us turn our expectations into realizing the possibilities of our sustainable world. We look forward to your comments, and may I now call on Steve Cook. You have the floor, Steve.
You're muted.
That was a good start, wasn't it? Thank you, Mahindra. I think you've pretty much summed it up pretty well there. I'm interested that today's 4th of July, it's Independence Day in America, but I would prefer that we call it Interdependence Day. Let this be the first truly Interdependence Day. And I think that is probably the root and branch of where everything has gone wrong up until now, in that we haven't recognised our interdependence, be it as businesses, governments, civil society organisations, community groups, academia, and most important of all, citizens. I think the role of citizenship has to become the predominant role in the world today. So the question for me really is, how do we do that? We know that a lack of ability to collaborate is at the centre of a lot of the issues and challenges that we face. And again, Mahindra, you've touched on some of the reasons for that, you know, notably in government. I personally think we should end politics and maintain governments, but end party politics as it exists in most democracies. We see that in business, where competition, and in fact, competition, I would suggest, is ubiquitous across the world and is a major source of the problems that we face. We are competing with each other rather than collaborating with each other. So that's a big issue. And so if we can't collaborate and we can't co-create, because we're too busy living in a mechanized world driven by things like data and the need to become data enabled. Actually, I'd argue we're becoming more data disabled as time goes by. We can't collaborate, we can't co-create. And the systems that would enable us to co-create more effectively don't exist, because those systems have been built on binary and very much established lines driven by governments and business over, what, 500 plus years. So I imagine that we need to change the governance models to allow the systems to change, to allow greater collaboration and co-creation, and to allow that to happen really fast, because I think there is, and certainly all of our work shows that on the ground, many, many millions of micro community-based initiatives and activities are going on, but they're really not joined up. One of the reasons why they're not joined is everything I've just said, but on top of all of that, where's the money? We keep hearing about fails of really great initiatives because the funding models don't work. So how do we change economics? How do we change philanthropy and so on? How do we change those dynamics? And of course, it's all lumped in, for me, it's all lumped into the same thing. It's competition and the problems that causes and lack of collaboration as an outcome of that. So what are we doing? Unstitution, which is an organisation that I founded, brings together business, governments and civil society organisations, academia and so on, into what we call binding coalitions. They are deliberately designed to be collaborative ventures. We're also launching the world's first Impact in Society Uncentre. This is a decentralised repository for knowledge share across all of those community and societal groups to redefine systems, including how economics works. This is something that we want to plant into, as physical environments, into spaces like city halls and businesses and so on, about 150 of them over the next 2 years. So the aim would be that all of those micro communities that are diligently doing great work around the world actually have the opportunity to have friends and to collaborate and co-create with other people who are like-minded, but to do that for real and to do that as citizens. And we would invite everybody from business leaders to heads of state to recognise that they are in fact ordinary, messy human beings, just like the rest of us, and that we should co-create on that basis. We're all the same. So millions of initiatives around the world doing tiny things, but unable to do things at what is erroneously called scale. So we talk about global and we talk about micro community level activity, and there's a massive gap in the middle. There is nothing that binds those two things together. So that would be my start point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve, for this insight into changing things. Mahendra?
Yeah, Steve, thank you for highlighting the issue of interdependency. But let us recognize that we have been preaching this for decades. And the freshest memory in our heads should be that the coronavirus did not recognize any geographical or political boundaries. We know very well that climate change also will not recognize. So the interdependency is there. The problem is we have the rich-poor divide in this world. And how we can bring together, really, that's a moral, ethical question, because in the end, we are in the same sinking boat if we don't make a difference. But thank you for raising that point. John Anderson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here with all of you today. And yeah, today I reread the Stockholm and Rio outcome documents, and it was very thought-provoking to see how complex, of course, the issues we're dealing with continue to be. And I agree that the Rio Declaration and Agenda 21, I mean, it says everything. But what was missing, as I think a lot of us realized, was a kind of ethical framework that talks about underlying values, whether those are ethical or spiritual or cultural. And that's where, as many of you know, the Earth Charter, that's what the Earth Charter grew out of. And I've been very much involved with that. And of course, you could say that hasn't really achieved a huge amount, but I think this effort to keep plugging away at the importance of the ethical and spiritual underlying values is very important. I work for a Buddhist association called SGI that's based in Japan and around the world, and we have members at the grassroots everywhere and are trying to highlight consistently the importance of that ethical framework, and also the the message of interconnectedness, the importance of hope, the importance of speaking from the heart, the importance of telling the truth, the importance of including youth in a way that is genuine and not bringing them in at the last minute to make a few token statements. The importance of including women's voices, Indigenous voices, and honestly, if I'd had time, I would have replaced myself with somebody else. This was one of the things we did at COP in Glasgow. We held panels and brought in voices of youth from the global south. And I think that's what we need to do, is to give those people the floor, because they can articulate what is needed much better than we can. And maybe there's a chance that if we're listening to those genuine, heartfelt voices that can explain the situation in an ultimately human and holistic way, then maybe we can listen enough to begin to make some of the changes we need to make. And it was very interesting for me to look back and see that actually our UK branch, SGI UK, held a meeting before the Rio summit called the Pre-Unsaid Summit on together with UNESCO and the Commonwealth Human Ecology Council, which did precisely this. It drew up a document about the importance of cultural, spiritual, ethical values, etc. And you could say again that didn't achieve very much, but it's there in the record. And I think the other thing we try to do is make sure that when we're doing education at the grassroots, we don't just fill people's heads with information, because as we know, we get overpowered, overwhelmed. We can't see any way forward. And so we try to make sure that empowerment is the key message in our local educational efforts. And we also happen to set up an institute in the Amazon near Manaus at the time of the Earth Summit. So we felt that is a really important practical initiative that does reforestation and education. That's been going since 1992. Thank you so much. I think I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan, for raising the question of moral and ethical values. The problem is our leaders in business and our leaders in governments do not set an example for being ethical and being moral. And that we can preach this, but it must come from the people. And it will come from the people when they feel perfectly well, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritual. Then as a sapient, you will do no harm to others and no harm to nature. The second point I want to make, which is a very important point you made, youth, genuine empowerment. The United Nations has been running for decades internship programs, 40 years. And we find even today, and when I was a young man, I wanted to go to the UN as an intern, to sit at a desk, and that's what's happening. They attend meetings after meeting. We need those youths to work with the farmers in the field looking at SDGs and getting the practical experience so that one day when they have a desk job, they can be committed leaders. But thank you very much, Joan, for raising some critical issues. May I now call on Robin Hood, please? What a lovely name to make a difference in this world.
Thank you, Mahendra. And yeah, there's definitely a big challenge in the world, which has been around for millennia, which is ensuring that the rich don't screw the poor. And as we know, it's the governance systems that are put in place that enable that to happen. It's the legal system. I'm an ex-advocate of the Supreme Court of South Africa. I'm also an ex-investment banker for large infrastructure projects in developing countries. And so from my own life experience, working in large multinational corporations and then starting my own transformation business in 1990, which was very lucky to advise the World Bank on its first sustainable energy policy for the first Rio conference in 1992. I was sitting on the stage in The Hague in 20 years later at Rio Plus 20 with environment ministers and CEOs, and Joe Confino, who I'm sure a lot of you will remember from The Guardian, who led the Guardian's environmental efforts. And people were saying exactly the same thing 10 years ago that we're saying right now. They're saying, well, this was 40 years ago that the limits to growth was published. What have we done with it? You know, that we see our emissions going up and blah, 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 blah. So I've written 8 books on this, and I'm currently running something called the Global Change Agent Program, where we build on some of the great work that Institution and we did together towards the end of last year about the transition from game A to game B. And for me, it's very simple. And so my efforts are focused on 3 different fulcrum points, if you like. The first was when we started Renaissance 2 in 2008 with some of the CSOs of global corporations who were trying to make a difference, including Shell, which didn't last long because we couldn't agree on a lot of things about many important variables that were going to make a big difference. But the point was that we were trying to shift mindsets and culture in the world of game A. And so that's very much a top-down, decision-focused, as Michael Bloomberg has always said, and we've had quite a few meetings over the years with him, is this decision useful? When Joan talks about too much information, well, that is exactly the problem. It's not only too much information, but there's not necessarily the right mix and the coherence of the information to be decision useful. So for senior people, our so-called leaders, as we, which only really half of them deserve the title at all, they need better decision useful information. But if it's not framed in a cultural shift, mindset shift, and then enforced in some way, which is our big problem with the INGOs and NGOs, they have no enforcement capacity whatsoever. There's no big stick to hit you with a 6th crime against humanity, ecocide, simply because after 20 years of trying to get ecocide along with genocide on the books, the world's top lawyers haven't persuaded the UN to do that, because the problem is the UN is captured as much by the states as the states are captured by the corporations. Yep, we have INGO capture and we have state capture. So the second level at which we have to be decision useful is not moving out of mindset and culture, which is vital, because I do believe consciousness is causal, and 99% of what human beings do today, we're literally in a trance. You walk around a supermarket and you watch people in a trance. I'm not kidding. You walk around offices and you see people sitting in front of a computer. They're in a trance too. They're not thinking because they're not being given the ability to make decisions that make a difference. So they say, what the hell? Why should I vote? Why should I care about product A, which has not got palm oil in it, when product B is cheaper and I have to save money, so I'll buy product B. So the problem again is decision usefulness is not just a top-down thing. It's a bottom-up thing, which is why we founded the Balancer 2.5 years ago. Now we've got 15,000 of the world's largest corporations, a few hundred of the world's largest NGOs, and a few hundred of the best apps to measure your carbon footprint and all sorts of other good things. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, where's the nearest restaurant in the city you're in, and so on. And so what we've done is we've created a simplified framework for people to find out what they care about in the Balancer app. That's www.balancer.app. Just download it onto an iPhone or an Android phone, or in any iOS environment or tablet. And basically it asks you, what do you care about? Because here's the funny thing, that even though we might know a lot about what's going on the planet, and I would say there's about 700 to 800 million, 10% of the human species right now actually knows what's going on. But my observation and my research is that they don't know what to do about it that will be effective. So they end up in a climate anxiety loop, right? And despair and depression and self-contraction and all sorts of very bad things that are leading to mental health disaster, let alone COVID, adding to that around the world. So the bottom-up impact is getting people to use this app. Now, as we've discovered in 2 years, and we've got a few hundred users now, pilot level, it ain't easy, because even if you simplify the global problematique down to those 8 things, sustainability, community, ethics, and accessibility to finance and so on, people still find it very difficult to actually make choices. To do that, that's why we give them the information. We say, well, here are the companies that score more than 50 out of 100, on these different capitals, resources, and their use of nature and being sustainable and so on. And so we want to do business with these people. And for companies, we enable them to go and do surveys based on what people care about. So they can develop products and services that people care about that are actually sustainable or even thrivable. And then in the middle, there's this huge gap that Steve mentioned. And I just call it fucked up politics. And because politics, money has captured politics, and we can't get the money out of politics, the only answer is to get massive numbers of people voting intelligently, making better decisions. And I do not see, and I've seen lots of attempts at systems and websites and wikis and stuff by lots of fantastic young people to try to get young people, especially young people and women, particularly in developing countries, to vote. I mean, if the Supreme Court decisions of the last month don't get people out to the polling booths in America, then there's no hope for any of us, really. I mean, because we can't influence the Chinese. They've got their 5-year plan. We certainly can't do anything about the Russians. In terms of South America and Africa, we just don't have the means, as everyone has pointed out. And so reinventing finance is really critical. Now, I'd love to say I have an answer for that, but I don't. I mean, there are millions of little initiatives and things, but I think we've got to rethink where the money goes, as Steve was pointing out absolutely correctly. Without the means and the resources, we just cannot scale this. And I know scale is a bad word for a lot of people, but I mean it, a context-appropriate utilization of cosmopolitan localism, of the ideas that work in different biomes and regional and local contexts that we can collectively share together around the world. And that's happening. But again, it's not funded. You look at the websites, we need money. And so we need money not only to get people out to vote, but to help them make better decisions. And that's I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Renaissance 2 was a good idea at the time, but let's come to the present moment. Businesses and corporations exist to make money, and governments rely on taxes on those profits of the corporations. Look at the situation today. Supermarkets are doubling and trebling prices. Farmers are not benefiting from that. Vaccines that cost $2 to make were sold at $100, $50 to $100. Where is the ethics and morals of the business world, and which Johan so well mentioned? I think business must get away from the fact that we need the world to have more and more and more consumption so they get more profits. But that more and more consumption is what is destroying the world. Mm-hmm. Look at modern lifestyles which produce 5 or 10 times the pollution of somebody living a poor lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So I think these are moral, ethical questions, and business has to realize that it is all suicidal. It may not be in the next decade, but I think the writing is on the wall that we will make irreversible change with no return. Can I now, it's a great pleasure to see you here, Mila, and you have the floor. Mila Popovic.
Thank you very much. I'm Mila Popovic with Evolving Leadership and many other platforms where I've been serving for some years now around the same questions and around the same concerns that we're discussing today. First of all, I would like to thank Earth Odyssey, Mahendra Shah, Heiner, Paul, Everybody, all the friends that I've been working with for some years now also. And to thank you, Mahendra, for providing a space for us to come together, to share experiences, insights, and predictions and concerns, to basically come together and show up together in the public space. And I think this is where I would like to kind of come into the circle, if you will. First of all, by saying that people are awakening. People are awakening, unfortunately, at a very, very high cost and a very great loss of life. But they are awakening and they are coming together. And I think what we are facing today is lack of big enough social architectures, big enough frameworks to hold the voice of people and channel the social energy, to connect the best practices, to connect conscious communities, to connect conscious initiatives, conscious businesses, concerned individuals, to basically channel that social energy forward into a massive global movement for change. There have been a burgeoning and flowering of many movements, but there has not been a big enough institution, organization of humanity to be able to voice that concern, to voice the universal needs, to voice and work for the human inspiration. And that is why we're still holding on to United Nations as the only structure that we have right now that is globally focused, right? And as well as the SDGs, as much as we criticize them and understand that they're imperfect, that this is an evolving process indeed, as it should be. But we're holding on in hopes that there is a structure that we can transform from within, revitalize it, make it conscious to work for the humanity. So I will say again, to address not only our circle, but to address that humanity, to call on the people and tell them they are awakening. There are more and more people that are realizing what's going on. There are more people that are connecting the dots and the missing links that are intentionally put there to separate us from each other and to fragment the possibility for people to truly unite in full consciousness, in full call to action. So I will say there is no lack of food. There is no lack of finance. And I don't have to bring the statistics. You can look them up right now. There is no lack. And I will change that language right now to say, believe me, fact-based, science-based, and information proven. There is plenty, there is an abundance of food. There is abundance of knowledge. There is abundance of finance. There is abundance of energy out there. There is abundance of us and social power out there. The issue is pre-distribution, participation in power, and my hope is partnership in power. And the channel through media, market, and movement channel for the social energy to take action to kind of accumulate into that momentum. And we know from research, it takes about 3.5% of the movement, 3.5%. If we can activate, imagine 3.5% humanity, that the shift could happen. All that I'm saying can be backed up by facts, which I just don't want to belabor right now, which can be found through research, through experience. So what I'm speaking about here is is there an organization out there that is the voice of the people? Is there an organization out there that is working for humanity? Nobody's in actuality in charge of climate change, in charge of pandemic, and that is for damage control. But what about thrivability that many have spoken about? What about going beyond sustainability is the damage control and working to realize and self-actualize humanity and work for universal human aspiration? We have gotten in our spirit to a point where we feel that's so far-fetched. We're barely working for survival, and I understand that. What we are working with here is the big question now that is urgent and a complete emergency is the quo vadis. Where are we going? Facing the best in us in the worst of conditions. And I think that's probably the toughest part, individually and collectively. What happens to human spirit, human character, human values, beliefs, and aspirations when you are in the worst of conditions? And we have shown ourselves that all of our heroes, all of our role models are the ones that have showed tenacity of purpose in the toughest of conditions. Dare I say, mention models. I mean, for some reason and for a valid reason, I think the Mandela phenomenon comes to mind. And I think there's a powerful reversal here in human needs. Going by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have to satisfy all of this, right? To basic human needs to go towards self-actualization. Our heroes, that we have recognized our heroes, which means that we have recognized that capacity in us, are the very people that managed to reverse that pyramid. And if you have a model that has been deprived of human connection, basic needs for 27 years, and come out as a hero, that says so much about human spirit, its capacity, and also our capacity to recognize what we truly value. So there is no lack of recognition in consciousness and in value. What we are dealing with is the need for a vademecum to counter this question, a guidance. And we have been offering it, all of us are saying, for decades now. Some of the pioneers that have worked on the front line of sustainability and consciousness shift have been speaking about this for 40, 50 years. And where are we now, right? I understand that. But something, unfortunately, through the toughest of conditions is emerging. I would love to see humanity evolving through contrast and not through conflict and not through tremendous loss of life. But here we are. And what we are dealing with is a complex system of mindset that drives military, that is used to plow through regions to create markets. And it's using media and money to infuse that market, again, with a certain mindset. And it's a self-perpetuating, enforcing complex system, reinforcing circular system. What do we have today? Next to it, reversing that, with the possibility to reverse that, are the organic systems, what we call the ecosystems. So to mindset, we have a greater rise in sense of unity and human solidarity, even though we have seen absolute disasters in the pandemic. But people are rising and people are awakening. So there's a more and more widening, a spiraling circuits of people connecting. Countering the military, there are social movements. If I told you that within the last 20 years, from only 28,000 civil society, public people's movements organization, within 20 years, we went over 10 million. There is people power. The question is how to organize, channel that energy. Next to media, of course, we have the democratized channels that have been offered through internet, which again can be co-opted, which were publicly funded. Facebook and all other technologies have been publicly funded and then co-opted for private gain. That's the problem. But we do have the capacity to take your personal phone and record disasters and share that. And one man's life who couldn't breathe and he was suffocated for 8 minutes on the street was shared. Otherwise, we would have never known about it. And next to markets, there are memberships and communities. And next to money, there are digital capacities to co-create network-based currencies for community exchange. These are just some ideas to tell you that we have begun this process. I am just sad to see the tremendous cost of it. So what we need, and I've heard all of my friends today speak of so many wonderful things, so I will not repeat, but systems thinking for systemic creation, this discussion of values, shift in consciousness. What we need is
Mila.
The question whether we infuse UN with new energy or we create around UN a circuit that will contain and channel that energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mila, thank you. We could listen to you forever because of your conviction on awakening social architecture and all the points you made. I have only one question. Half of the world's population, women, are excluded in business and in governments. They represent 50% of the political votes. Why do not the women come to help themselves get that vote and force change? That's one example. The second example is women have the power of the wallet more than men. And women can also force business to change. So where does this conviction leave us? We can look at all the examples you gave, but here is an example staring us in the face and nobody is doing anything about it. 95% leaders are men. 80% of CEOs are men. Parliamentarians it goes on and on. And women with their empathy, caring, compassion, can change this world because the world needs that compassion and empathy to become sustainable. Thank you so much. Can I now call upon Heiner? Heiner, you have the floor. Okay.
Hello, I'm Heiner in Berlin. You see, this topic is very dear to me. I was in environmental monitoring, research, management, education, now media, and I heard all these big words for decades. And especially recently in Stockholm, they came up with new terms like crisis. We have a triple crisis. And then there was much joke behind. Isn't it a multiple crisis? Isn't it a multifaceted permanent crisis? So this made me realize that we have to look into the words we use and what our mindsets and metaphors behind that. And that is actually where I feel we have to come in. We know since the global problematique was the Club of Rome in 1970 that there are root causes and they need to be negotiated because the deep drivers and blind spots are the areas where we think we know but don't. And so I feel when we want to continue and learn something from the process the last 30 years is that we make our words solid, that we really use not just systems, but also models, not mathematical models, but shared models to really negotiate what we do with young people, our positions, our perspectives, our frames of references, and then come to the values. So what I say, we have to really come to new ways to present and share and negotiate. And that's what we called with Noah Brown, reviewing the Rio 92 process, that he said, it is not about the three conventions. We have a plethora of conventions and international days, but we also need to look into the common frames of references. And that was discussed in the pre-processes of Rio. And he really asked me to put an emphasis to that. And the next thing I want to say, you see, there are now young people really desperate, speaking about consciousness. And then they merge with astronauts and speak about Earth pictures and the new overview paradigm. Overview is good, but not enough. We need shared orientation. So I think we are in a crisis of our orientation. And this is an evolutionary issue through the human capacities, technologies, mind to be now global. So before our humanity evolved, that we can react and look short-term and also just for me and maybe my family and my kin. But we have to find ways to share this, this concreteness, and not just in words and not just in numbers, but in spectra and feelings and issues beyond the points. So connecting the points and the dots, like Mila said, is not enough. We have to see there's a spectrum of meaning between points, and there's a spectrum of fields in larger spaces and cognitive spaces. And this is actually what I feel I'm struggling with. And there, this deliberation, what people really mean, is very essential. And I can only tell you by finding clear words, like we coined the term glocal 1990, to really show it has to be micro, meso, macro at the same time. And we have to really bring this concrete architect thinking or kindergarten sandbox thinking of models, as we are model making animals, UNESCO wrote. We have to bring that together. And that's my struggling. And I think this embodiment, not just using empty plastic words, is the heart of where I feel we should not give up, but really question issues, the scales, the proportions and consequences, and not hide behind systemic or holistic. That's the wrong way out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heiner. I want to raise a point because this webinar is about Rio 92 and how we move forward. I remember very well also Noel Brown talking about the conventions. The crux of Rio was Agenda 21, which I had the pleasure to write the Earth Summit summary. And it was the Rio principles. Nobody can argue against the Rio Agenda 21 and the Rio principles. And yet these were not even mentioned. These words were not mentioned in Stockholm. I mean, what is the matter with this scientific community? That there was no mention of Rio, which was the 30th anniversary the same week. So my point is, this area of politics, even in the scientific world, in the business world, in the government, I think we need to find our ethics and morals to move forward on this. May I now call on Donna Nellam. Donna, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I am a co-founder with Institution as well, along with Steve Cook and many, many folks that are joining us. And I think at some level, one of the things that we wrestle with is this need to come up with answers, all of us up here as well, to present our perspective on this is the problem, here are the answers. And at some level, there's a recognition that these are very layered meta crises that we're facing. No one of us has the definitive answers. We, as Heiner's just saying, we use language very often. We use certain terms like collaborate and co-create. And as Steve has already raised right from the outset, and others around the need to develop human consciousness, is the learning how, in fact, to collaborate and to truly co-create together. We are all ordinary citizens at some level, whether we're in business, government, civil society, or whether we don't identify with any of those. And so our work and what we're really focusing on is how to be levelers. How do we bring people together and to bridge the divides that are there? All of the fails that we've all been describing, we've all had different ways of describing these things. And being right is never enough. And so the question becomes, how can we learn together as we navigate forward into an unknowable future? How can we embrace the fact that this is paradoxical, that this journey that we're all on is both emergent, organic, and intentional and by design. So many of the elements that people have suggested as real potential to bring about some change, these are the pieces of a mosaic that we can together come together and co-create something that no one of us might have envisioned quite in the way that we're seeing it. These are all pieces of a puzzle. And the other theme that I would want to pick up on, because I'm really trying to build on things we're all talking about here, as opposed to saying, well, this is the answer. But the other theme is global. It's not just global, it's not just local, it's joining these things up. And so all of the micro bio-regional opportunities to look at what are the needs in community, embracing the cultures that are there, embracing all the diversity that's there, understanding the real socioeconomic and environmental issues that are there in place in community is so important. And how can we learn, cross-learn, I think is the term I hear Steve use a lot, so that we can share these learnings, not to assume that we're going to scale in a cookie cutter way, but so that we can come to understand the patterns better and be able to ramp up and amplify the kinds of changes that we're all trying to see and be in the world. So the patterns start to give us clues about things that we can do, all of us. So it does come back to this question of agency, all of us having agency. We need all of us on this journey. We need to find ways to bridge the very macro, conceptual, amazing wisdom that's out there that doesn't actually land on the ground anywhere, whether that's academic or whether it's the people writing the books that 8 billion people on planet Earth aren't going to read and shouldn't necessarily need to. It's the grassroots stuff that's so important. How do we honor that as well? How do we work in that space in between that brings people together across divides and move away by the actual behavior that we start to experiment with and engage in, whereby we stop looking for heroes. Heroes aren't going to come in and do this for us. We all need to find our own way. We're all starting in different places. As we've described, we're all messy humans. So the work that we're doing at Institution, we keep saying it's not about us, folks. We are, and I really resonate with what you raised, Mila, around what is the body that we can bring together. And this is what we're very much working on, that enables all of these gifts to come together across the divides, across the sectors, where we can actually get stronger by bringing these things together instead of working in these silos, which is the biggest issue that we see. So as we look at the learnings over our past year, as we've been moving around through the world, some of the biggest issues that we've seen is even those people among us, even perhaps in this room right here today, who agree on the fail points, are very concerned about the problems in the world, but end up getting into debate with one another about the right way to change all of this. Well, folks, none of us here have the definitive answers, and we need to discover the ways that we can come together and build together and bring in the unusual suspects that typically aren't even engaged in these conversations, that really, we're all saying, need to be in touch with their own agency. And the world is inherited by the young people. It's the young people that are going to be facing the long-term perspective around all these changes. It isn't just about climate. It isn't about any one of these issues. They're all very layered and overlapping. So I will stop there. I could go on just, as all of us could go on at length. I think the real power comes when we start engaging in real dialogue amongst each other, back and forth, really listening to each other instead of us being talking heads in webinars on Zoom calls, trying to give people the answers. We don't know, folks. folks, but we're not starting from ground zero either. So I go back to what Neela said in terms of there is a huge growing constellation of people out in the world with the will and the desire to bring about this change. That's what we need to trust in. And let's all figure this out together and see this today as just a portal to an ongoing work in progress. And it really is work on the ground. It's not going to happen in these conversations, but these can be good places to get things moving and propelling. And let's tap into the feminine and the masculine in all of us. It isn't just a women's thing to kind of come in and now let's force it. Force isn't going to do it. What are the magnetic things that are going to draw people in? Where's the human spirit? Where's the fun and where's the joy? And I need to turn myself off, but thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Donna. What is the problem? What is the body? Take climate change as an example, and I hope speakers as they come will touch on this issue. Climate change has two equations, the supply side and the demand side. We are focused on the supply side, how to make it more efficient, how to reduce carbon emission. Nobody is talking about the consumption patterns. And consumption patterns is actually the root cause of all emissions. And we are not talking about it. So there is an example of identifying the root problem there. And of course, it means consumption patterns will mean sacrifices by everybody. And that's the challenge. Do we have the ethics and the morals to make that sacrifice? May I now call upon Steve Salmoni? You have the floor, Steve. Steve? Okay, while still we find Steve, can I call on Enzo Ditar?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm pleased to exchange ideas and solutions with the participants in this webinar. So my name is Enzo Di Taranto. I've been a United Nations senior official for almost 30 years. I've been working both at headquarters and in many countries worldwide. So I could form a clear idea of what the United Nations are capable of. And so a little bit moved by frustration, I moved to the private sector a few years ago, and now I have my company that is Exent Technologies, IMC, and we focus on promoting sustainability through the development of clean technologies that can solve actual issues such as production of high protein food or drinkable water through desalinization of saline water. Other technologies engage cleansing plastic from the oceans and so on. So very practical issues, and we've tried to find practical solutions as well. So let me share with you the fact that I moved from, at the beginning of my UN career, from being kind of idealistic and ethical in my vision and my approach to become more realistic and adaptive at this stage of my life and of my contribution to society. So I would say that, you know, sustainability is obviously a multidimensional issue, a multidimensional challenge that requires multidimensional solutions as well. So I agree with some of the participants on the fact that a lot has been done, that nobody has a specific solution, but at the same time, all solutions are important. And as I think Mother Teresa said, the ocean is made of drops. And so just one drop is important for the health and existence of the overall ocean. And this is just to say that all solutions are important. But let me try to simplify the complexity with an idea or a model that I've been developing with my team that could be titled The Pyramid of Sustainability. And if you visualize in your mind a pyramid and you see the center of the shape, the bottom and the top. So you put at the center of the pyramid, you put governments and parliaments. At the bottom, there are communities and networks. And on top of the pyramid, you place specific industries. And I'm going to elaborate briefly on this point. So governments and parliaments are the centerpiece of solution making for sustainability for two simple reasons. The parliaments are the only organs in any nation worldwide that have the capacity to enforce certain behaviors, certain rules, certain procedures. So having legislations that protect and promote sustainability is critical. And obviously governments are capable to enforce, to actually impose to populations certain behaviors like respecting the environment, recycling, plastics, and so on. So, and obviously governments have also the power to allocate budgets so that these policies are real. So once we put governments and parliaments at the center of this pyramid, I would like to recall what has been said already on this conversation, that a lot has been done, a lot has already been achieved after Rio. And if you look at COP26, which was held just a few months ago in November, you see that governments have reiterated their commitment to sustainability. Now, some of this commitment is just political. I think that most of it is practical. I'm in Europe now, and I can see that there are actually legislations and regulations being developed or already implemented to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2030 and even before. So let's say that the center, the core of this pyramid, it's already quite advanced, if you want. Now, if you go at the bottom of it, you see the communities and the networks. You see the youth, the organizations of women. I mean, most of these actors have been already mentioned in this call. Yes, please.
Thank you, Enzo. We have a host of other speakers, so if you can finish.
No,
please.
I want to finish, but I would like to have the same time that other speakers have had, if possible. Or if you tell me if I have less time, I will be faster.
Uno minute, however.
Yeah, you already had 7 minutes now.
Okay. Okay, so give me another minute to finalize this concept. So the bottom, the networks and the populations and the communities, I would suggest that this audience look at the concept of DAO, which means decentralized autonomous organizations. And so to understand how this space is moving without looking at centralized entities, but more going on the decentralized side. Just to, with this I conclude, on top of the industry of the pyramid, you find industries that have the infrastructure that could enable real change. And these industries are space, military, oil, and gas. These are the three industries that have the financial and infrastructural capacity to shift the economic model globally. And my organization is working with these particular partners because in my experience, the bottom-up approach is not working efficiently, and we need to fill the gap of the top-down approach so that these industries are committed and actually lead the sustainability movement, and some of them are already doing it. So if interested in knowing more, you please contact me on LinkedIn, and I will be pleased to elaborate further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Enzo, for making the transition from the United Nations to the private sector on issues that you're working on. Can I now call on Priscilla Frotta? Is Priscilla still here?
Not in the room right now.
All right. In that case, we are halfway. We are on 10th statement, and I think it's an opportune moment halfway through that we call on a Brazilian to come forward and make his statement. Yuri, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mahendra. Hello, everybody. My name is Yuri Sanada. I'm from Brazil. I'm a co-founder of Earth Safe with Mahendra. Just to say thank you to Jörg and Heiner for helping us to put this together, and everybody to come. As you know, we're making a documentary for this year. We are in Brazil, so we have Rio Plus 30, and we intend to have this documentary ready by the end of the year as part of celebration or recognition of what's happening here in Brazil in 1992, what can happen in the future. So I'm just gonna say thank you very much for the participation. Please continue.
Thank you so much. Short, but always to the point. Thank you, Yuri. Steve Salmoni, I saw him a moment ago. Steve, are you in?
Yes.
You have the floor, Steve. Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, Steve, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here with such a group, such a wonderful international gathering. I don't know many of you. One person that, aside from Mahendra, who I'm aware of mainly through their great work, is Heiner Benking. And I just want to thank all of you for all that you're doing. I wish I had something really helpful at this point to add. I'm going to reserve my time now to listen a little bit more to what others with the expertise have to say here. But I am impressed by the goodwill and wisdom shown here. And I hope that it leads to some wise action that makes it possible for us humans to meaningfully and sensibly acknowledge, address, and overcome the daunting global challenges that confront us right now. They are colossal from my perspective. And I wish us all well. And I want to thank Mahendra again for the splendid leadership he's displayed over a long period of time.
Steve, please
thank you to all.
Please say in 1 minute how I know you, how your work on architecture and deep structures and higher orders led to many common contacts, because nobody knows you.
I'm a psychologist, and my interest primarily has been, since the turn of the century, in a concern for the growth of the human population on this planet and our collective failure to share an understanding of why it is a species such as ours, with such incredible capabilities, cannot examine and come to a shared understanding of why human population numbers continue to grow despite our global efforts to limit them. We have a trajectory of human population growth that is absolutely astounding. And we have not done anything meaningful to reverse the course of that growth. So I'm familiar, Heiner, with you because you are very, you're as active as I am on the internet, and our paths have crossed quite a number of times. And I've appreciated your contributions to our understanding the predicament we're in, but I have remained focused on trying to encourage people to look at the fact that the human population is the root cause of these ecological and climate problems that we are facing. And at some point, we're going to have to look at how we humanely acknowledge, address, and overcome the continuous level of human population growth. I don't know how better, I'm not sure I know any better how to respond to you, Heiner, but and the same for Mahendra. We've never had any direct contact, but I've been active on the internet for certainly since 2001. And I've interacted with a lot of people about this and been in a lot of places in cyberspace. And I continue to urge some attention to the realization that that humans are not masters of the universe for all our wondrous capabilities. We happen to be creatures of the earth. We are a part of and integral to a web of life here. And we need to better understand our place in the order of all this. I'm finished.
Thank you. Thank you. As a psychologist, you are an example of a man who speaks with will and wisdom. Only on the question of population, we set out in the late 60s, early 70s, the limits of growth. The population growth of the world is over. It's going to settle at 9 to 10 billion, and that's it. unless, of course, countries start to multiply again. So the demographic problem is no longer an excuse for us, because if you have 100 million people who produce 20 units of carbon emissions, and you have 10 million, equivalent number who produce 2, as it is the case with many countries. So anyway, it's not demography, it's demography type consumption, and I think we need to take that on board. Can I now call on Robert Schramm? Are you still here, Robert?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much.
You have the floor.
Okay, well, I will do my best to keep it in 4 minutes, guys. It will be a challenge. So, yeah, I'm currently based in Porto di Ascoli in Italy. And I worked as a project coordinator for 25 years before in utility. In the last 10 years as an activist. As a transition engineer for connecting and creating solutions. What we want to do is bridge the gap between the current degenerative systems that we have to regenerative systems. So to explain very simple what I'm doing here, I'm here coordinating a network of local groups, organizations and people at the bottom, grassroots. They are looking for new solutions, prototyping new ways of living, sharing resources, thinking of new ways of educating our children with new value systems. On the top, I'm also on the meta level coordinating and connecting a lot of these millions of active groups. In the center is the heart, the compassion for humanity and nature, the love that we feel inside. And what we basically are doing is we are connecting these two fields, the feedback loops. And the feedback loops will generate all the energies that are going on. So that's to start with. Advice and opinion for the future. I have sympathy for the Sustainable Development Goals. However, we all understand, I think they do not go far enough. They're in silos. And I think we should upgrade to the Regenerative Development Goals, where we implement feedback loops. Yeah, I think the SDGs, though, are a good stepping stone towards creating a better world, but it's not enough. How do we overcome this predicament we're in? I think the main challenges lie in dogmatic patterns. I mean, cultural, political, economic education. We are running around for thousands of years already and stuck in these dogmatic patterns. How do we break the loop? And actually, I also feel we should really take a look at the root causes, but the truly root causes. We're talking about it, but actually the last 2 years we experienced COVID. Everybody is talking about vaccinations, but I rarely hear someone talking about where did the virus came from? Why do we have these wild animal markets and deforestation? What, and the question or the answer might be, these poor farmers, they need food for to feed their families. So if we can provide them with basic needs or basic income, then you perhaps can get to the root cause of that problem, and we won't be bothered with another virus that might have more impact again. So 45 seconds to go. Find balance, as I heard, between the masculine and feminine energies within us. Very important. It's not about the number of women or men, I think. It's more the balance within us. Expand on global and local networks for regenerative villages. Cities are super spreaders for COVID. I think the decentralization is a good thing. And yeah, implementing universal basic income, I would couple it to a 20-hour work week, because 70% of the jobs are non-essential and 30%, as we learned, are really essential. And I think we can redistribute that in a healthy way. So basically, those are my points. 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. You put the key word regenerative. let's not forget that when agriculture began 10,000 or more years ago, it was regenerative. And then we had to pass through the Monsanto, BT, whatever, cotton, and etc. And now we are going back. So here is the circle of change. And it's time to look back at the wisdom that exists out there, to go back to nature. And that's a very, very important point. So thank you so much. I see Erich Ben-Sassi. Are you in a position to make a statement, Erich? Can you hear me? Okay, then I turn to Paul Verbos. Please, Paul, you have the floor. Okay. David Bovell, I see you there. So please,
the poll is there.
Wait. I started out by saying I'm very glad the internet problems were solved and I'm allowed to speak after all. At that point, the internet cut me out. So when you started saying we have problems with conflict and communication, wow, that's sort of a great center. At the beginning of this preparation, a big question was asked. We learned 50 years ago that our survival is at stake. Why have we not accomplished more? And I have heard people ask whose fault it is. I have been in many discussions where that is the focus. Whose fault is it? In the year 2009, I was sent by the National Science Foundation to work with the Senate of the US to implement President Obama's #1 commitment. This would be the year of climate change. And when that failed, people asked me, whose fault was it? And if you want to fix the problem, you want to start thinking, what did we do wrong? And my answer was, of course, it was all of our faults. And when any one of us tries to put all the blame on someone else, that's the fault. It's a way of thinking that screws us up. Each of us needs to learn something that Jesus once said. Before you start talking about the splinter in your brother's eye, look at the beam in your own eye. Work first on what you could have done better. And all of us could have done better in the year of climate change legislation 2009. But the truth is, it wasn't just the US that failed. There was also a great Paris Agreement. There was an agreement that would solve all climate problems. And in my view, that was a bigger failure than what we had, because that was a triumph of public relations, people advancing their careers by looking really great, by accomplishing nothing. And so what I come back to were the starting words which we got from Mila. There are people who said we don't need leaders. I think Mila's talk is a great lead. We should follow Mila's leadership, and I've been doing a lot of that this past year, trying hard. One of the things, Mila said several important things we simply need to follow up on more effectively. One of them, of course, is we need to build networks that really process information with a higher level of integrated intelligence. It's not just doing our own gardens. I work a lot with the Quakers of the United States. They are a serious player, as are their friends. I have a friend who may have invented the word global. You know, think global, act local. A guy named Walter Corson, he was involved in population and global problems. And I often think, gee, he was a good friend, but he made a mistake. Just as Jesus inspired people to do stupid things when they twisted his words, when you twist Walter Corson's words, you end up spending all your energy on your own garden. The lobbyists for the oil companies are so excited, at least the bad ones are excited, when people say, I'll solve the problems of the world by working on my garden and we'll leave the oil companies alone. Well, you know, the problem is climate change demands integrated new solutions where we cooperate together in powerful networks. and the need for new networks is critical to the new way of thinking. It's not just turning it over to industry, it's whole new networks. If you don't mind, I will share just one slide. People talk about systems thinking. The #1 conference in the world today on advanced systems thinking used to build intelligent systems is the IEEE Society on Computational Intelligence. They gave us a little thing called the Deep Learning Revolution. July 9th, I give them a plenary talk, and this is a slide I won't show because it's too big. These are things we need to focus on. Climate extinction is one of the focus goals. I am grateful for Mila and our friend Jerry Glenn for working with the Secretary General to try to do something to build up better networks of information on focused strategies to understand and efficiently address 4 great fears and 2 great hopes. I see Mila as being especially important in this great hope, this human potential, this human communication. When we have Zoom discussions, we're not just talking heads. These are the skeletons from which we can start to build networks. And these networks are crucial to the level of consciousness we need to really get deep. But in terms of climate stuff, there's a lot of solution to what's happening in Europe that von der Leyen doesn't know about. You people in Europe would have a much greater hope in the next 10 years if von der Leyen had access to the serious engineering technology information, which is already posted on this website, thanks to a friend in the space community. And the bottom line is there are vested interests blocking the technical information needed to build networks to solve concrete problems that are out there. Anyway, I've probably overdone my time. Good luck. And at least the website will make more sense than I do. And thank you, Mila.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your words of wisdom. Although we had a rule, no presentations in a 4-minute statement. But I thank you, but you ask a question, whose fault is it? There is one species called the sapiens, and there are 100 million other species who have a right to life also. It's the sapiens that are responsible for everything going wrong. The question is, which sapiens among the sapiens bear the bigger share of the responsibility? Anyway, thank you so much for your point. And now Steve isn't here. David Boville. David.
Hi there. Thank you for calling me. I'm in London here, by the way. When I read the question, I was invited here by Heine, thinking about the next 50 years and the mistakes or the reasons for the slow progress in the past. 2 main things sort of occurred to me. I think it's good to start maybe with the good things. So there are some things that I think have been done really well. So I think surprisingly, we've done really well at understanding the problem and communicating the nature of problems to people. And that's both on a scientific level and on an emotional and a spiritual level. So there is a lot more understanding in the world and a lot more feeling in the world about the nature of the problems. And then there are some things that we've done really, really badly. Basically, we've done really, really badly at understanding and changing the nature of the structures that affect change. So we've made almost no progress in changing the institutions that mediate change at a large scale. We've made almost no progress in the way that we cooperate, even as intellectuals, activists, and thinkers. We share information, but we have got very little progress on how we actually come together to act in deep, sustained, meaningful ways that channel resources. So for me personally, I think the biggest focus that we should be thinking of, and the biggest opportunity, is to address the nature of the institutional failure that surrounds us. And from a positive point of view, there are many tools at our disposal now that allow us to consciously design institutions, both legally and technically in terms of software. It's not about knowledge and networks and sharing and spirituality. It's about coming together to take action. And the word that defines what coming together, or the science of coming together to take action, is governance. So governance is the science of coming together to take action. And institutions are the structures that house that governance. And when human beings, hopefully, in a better future world, design new forms of governance, that means channeling richer and wider human values into the science of taking action, into the decisions that are made. And unfortunately, I think historically there's been a breakdown between, if you like, spirit and law. So many well-intentioned people are naturally allergic to things like finance, are naturally allergic to the constraints of institutions, naturally allergic to the evils that powerful people, accountants and lawyers, have done to the world over millennia. And so they throw away the very tools that we need to change the world. We need to get better at using these tools, and that means we need to really study law. We really need to study the way in which even this group of people here can come together to take action. And that's not just about protesting, that's about dealing with money, investing, new ways of bringing decision makers and showing the world that we can act together in a mature, intelligent and effective way. Because quite honestly, when most of the world of business or most of the people around the world look at us, they think we're lovely people, a little bit weird, but completely ineffective at taking action. So they disrespect our statements and our decisions because they don't respect our ability to come together and take action. And that is the one thing that I think we can change. And for my part, that's what I've been studying. By the way, that's not just the hard stuff, the law and the software development, and that we can embody these new governance structures. People mention DAOs, but that's, yes, I've been involved in that world since the start of it. It's also these redesigned institutions that channel values in a better way need to be entertaining and exciting and compelling. They need to channel our emotions and our beliefs. We need to want to be there and to enter into them. And so it's not just about money, it's about channeling those other human values and emotions towards taking action. And those aspects have to be in these new forms of governance. And until we tackle new institutions and new forms of governance, there is no hope on hell that mankind will solve complex, systemic, large-scale problems.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Come together to act. We need global partnerships were promised time and time again in the last 50 years, but never delivered. And that's a fundamental problem. We don't have global governance, and climate change needs global governance. And we are not prepared to make sacrifices by those that have the bulk of the pollution, the emissions. Historically, it's only a handful of nations that account for 60–70% of the emissions which are up there. But they do not come forward. So I think governance, yes, absolutely. But again, ethics and morals have to be introduced in the governance system, that we share the common but differential responsibility. Can I now call on Eugen? You've been sitting there with patience.
Hi, Mahendra. Hi, everything. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I see also that there are a couple of people here who contributed to what I'm doing to the Law of Nature Manifesto, either directly or indirectly. And thank you, Donna, very much for your introduction to what I wanted to bring in. I noted bring people together instead of working from the silos. That's something I struggled across as well, and we need to fix this. Now, I want to start in the 80s and 90s and go through it quickly. At the time, I worked at a company where root causes had to be solved, no option, leaving them open. Highest impact innovations were accepted and supported to get them through the system, and it really worked. And we also applied something that became familiar through Corona. It was called flatten the curve. With Corona, the exponential growth of the virus was supposed to be stopped or broken through flatten the curve practices. But what had no attention was that actually the complexity and the bureaucracy were flattened the curve as well. Extremely fast decisions happened. The bureaucracy was out of the way. And we applied the same practices with data center computers, bureaucracy, complexity, and other organizational matters. But then the best practices came. We still apply flatten the curve in computers, and that can be mathematically simulated. But the ability to apply them for organizational matters, to get rid of the big obstacles standing in all our ways, that ability has been lost. And I can tell you up to 2004, my innovations, which were usually at the company level, were accepted relatively easily and got through the system. But in 2004, my manager called me and said I had to move on to something else. And the consequence was that a big solution we had implemented to flatten the curve of bureaucracy and complexity had to be stopped. It had to be stopped because clients demanded compliant with the same practices that created the exponential growth of bureaucracy and complexity. Now, from that time onward, I participated in about 20 initiatives, often related to climate or the social sustainable development goals. Only 2 are left. All others either get stuck in the system, reduce their ambitions to something small, usually in a box, or face the challenges we just have heard and just don't get the things accepted. One of those left is Sustainocracy from Jean-Paul Klose in Eindhoven. And I'm arguing it's left because he got things done. Others just didn't get through the system anymore. And the other one is the initiative I started when I discovered, hey, myself and many others just don't get through the system anymore. That's called the Law of Nature Manifesto Initiative. And it got really interesting last year when, first of all, I asked a question around this strongly held belief that root causes cannot be solved in complex environments. And we collected a whole bunch of reasons as to why it wasn't done, but no serious answer telling that it cannot work. On the contrary, we identified root causes. And actually, a little bit later, we got into one that must be, in my experience, the most damaging root cause of all. So if we want to get our innovation through the system, we need to fix it. And what happened there, I simply asked, did a poll on LinkedIn and asked the questions, do laws of nature from engineering, physics, mathematics apply to social, management, and brain research disciplines as well? And 59% of the respondents said yes. And several provided examples. And then came responses from scientists. One was saying, we don't know how to apply, or we cannot apply laws of nature from physics and the like into social sciences. And another one was, there's no concept as to what qualifies as a law of nature. And that made a couple of alarm bells ringing, and it boils down to this. At the end of the day, it's all about decision-making, lengthy decision-making processes, and people in lower and especially higher places making decisions. And when decisions are made. They're all verified for compliance with human-made regulations, best practices, methods, even theoretical methods, and fixed ways of thinking, you name it. But where is the compliance verification with the laws of nature relevant to the decision? And that turned out to be missing. Actually, I asked it, politicians over here, what about applying the laws of nature? And the answer was, what is a law of nature? So here, you have the most damaging root cause, in my experience, and also the highest impact solutions. Now, how do we get people applying it? Was a question of asking hard to ignore questions, like youth organizations or initiatives represented here, asking the question, when a decision is made, do laws of nature occur? What are the practices they demand? When a decision is made, does it improve or worsen core human values like health? If you all do that, I'm convinced we can get the door open and push decision makers to apply laws of nature, flatten the curve, get rid of the obstacles, and free the path for the bottom-up initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugen. You mentioned education for compliance of the laws of nature. If you look at nature, everything in nature exists in harmony. And we need to learn from that harmony as to how we can introduce in the human world. Now, before I call on the last speaker, a man who speaks from his heart and works on Earthbeat. He came to my resort. 35 years I was in the UN system. And in 2004, I quit. I still continue to work in the UN, but I went on to develop a resort for people to experience holistic well-being, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, which is the foundation of adopting sustainable, responsible lifestyles. Jörg, you have the floor since you have had the experience not so long ago.
Well, Mahendra, you know, I'm a filmmaker. Most of all of you know me after having many Zoom talks together. My take on this is I've been working in this field for more than 40 years, and I've watched and observed lots of these developments you've been talking about. I have seen changes, quite a few changes, in terms of how we approach these things. So the mindset has changed, but already in the 80s, we were discussing, when the Greens were founded in Germany, the change of the industrial production system. The question of how we actually consume has been on the table. And nothing of these discussions really made a difference eventually. So there, obviously, what is some say are the root causes are systemic inhibitions to make change real. And some of this has to do with people who are in the decision-making business, are responsible to do something, that they have not experienced their own personality and their own completeness and their balance with nature, but have been driven on the path, it's starting in school normally, of going somewhere, separating feelings, emotions, and knowledge from each other, separating different ways of how to deal with things from what they really feel and what they feel empowered to do. So this separation is one of the root causes. And when you think about the healing aspect, how to bring this back together again, this is done by something that I've been trying for quite some time, that is creating images that are so familiar to each of us that we can connect globally through these images, a common desire, something we can express in films and make something common that we have as a powerful system underneath. So we have the powers of thinking people and bringing them together and do incredible things. And so far, we don't have the system to really make it happen. Only in small places it works. So I just went to the Bonn Climate Conference, and again, I saw so many impediments, so many failures of social interactions. So if we work on systems that really bring people together, we can really bring out the best of what we are. And once this is happening, once we manage our sort of system of approaching the world like animals, like on different levels of animal recognition of the world, when we just base everything on our normal, on our animal senses that the social media is building on, we can't really evolve to the next level. And I think working on a system, we can all do this together, working on systems that bring people together in a meaningful way so that they can cooperate and bring out the best of themselves in order to make change happen. I think that's, for me, the major issue. And just to give you an idea, because Mahendra mentioned Earthbeat, we are planning to go with Young People's Coalition to the next climate conference and demand that the people attending the climate conference are giving definitive answers. What can you give us, young people, not me, but the young people's organizations that we collect? What can you give us in order to empower us for making change happen? What is the education that you can give us in order to learn enough to make that happen? So we need social and emotional control of what we are doing, and then we can really make things happen. And that's my major take on this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorg. I think someone questioned that meeting in these webinars and on Zoom. I think the wealth of diversity of some 30 people here, bringing vast experience and backgrounds, has been truly wonderful, and we embrace that. And please note that we have 4 webinars we are running. One of them is a youth webinar, which will be webinar 4. The third webinar is on focus. We want to hear the voices of the women, the voices of the youth. And Joanne Anderson in the chat asked for youth from the Global South, gathering of the youth from the Global South. I think it's time we take the youth of the world. We have out among 750 million LinkedIn members, some of them are from the South. And we are gratified that we have had 3,039 impressions, views of our posts. It's a first step, but it is not enough out of the 750 million people who are out there as members of LinkedIn. So I think that commitment needs to come. And our webinar today, which is almost coming to 1 hour and 50 minutes, is really an example of dialogue must take place by ordinary people, but committed ordinary people with principles, and that's missing. And I think this has been the greatest take from all of you. Thank you so much for having contributed. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yuri, you have the last word from Brazil. Obrigado.
Yeah, obrigado. Yeah, as you know, we're preparing this. I spoke before. This documentary, now you guys are part of it. We have great sentences we can use and put some nice images. Of course, Jürgen's a filmmaker as well, so you know what I'm talking about. Make a very good, very powerful message through film to send to Brazil and the rest of the world. So thank you very much for everybody. Has everybody talked? Is that anybody missing, or are we done, everybody?
I have a request, if it's okay with you all. Steve spoke first, and Steve Cook, and it's always hard going first. And I, having worked with him really closely, I would just really value hearing any summary thoughts, having listened to all this, Steve, if people have a few moments. And if not, that's okay too. I'm sure he's cool with that. But I would love, I know, but it's really hard going first. So would that be okay?
We have 10 minutes. We can all come forward, in last words as well, if that's okay by Mahendra.
And Jared hasn't said anything. I want to remind you. So maybe we give him the floor now briefly, and then we do a last round, and then Steve can have the last word if you think of that. Okay.
Jared, you have the floor. I didn't notice you. But then
I have to step out a few times because of some problems. I'm working in the running boiler houses and chilled water plants and so on. So when I think at the last 30 years and what happened in the last 30 years, I think that we increase in the last 30 years more than 42 to 50% our carbon dioxide emissions are in our plants, because the biggest thing is the commercial, bring out more money, getting more money. And what I recognize in the last 30 years is only to increase the profit. And that's what's our biggest problem. And when you see from top down, from what the government says and what the government did, we're getting in time money for go away from gas to oil or to coal again and so on. And that's not the way, it can be a sustainable future. So the only way to become sustainable is to get not from top down, I think from bottom up. So we need more people in small communities. They like to change things and want to change things, and then we can make a difference. But if we go the way like it's now, we will change nothing in the next 30 years. So we will find every year another thing that it's not possible to do things, or it's not possible to do that thing or that thing or that thing. And we waste so much energy, and we waste so much personal energy, and also energy by coal or carbon dioxide energy, or driven by carbon dioxide energy. So the only thing that can make a difference is to go from bottom up, to find people and to make communities, small communities, to support each other, and then we can find solution for the future. And if we don't find a solution from the bottom, we don't have any solution, and there was no solution for future.
Thank you. Jared, you speak like a builder, that you build the foundation of a house and then only you can build the house.
Yes.
And yes, we've talked forever about bottom to top, and the top has the power, so they always escape. And what you say is so right, that we need to mobilize the citizens for change in this world.
Yes.
Okay, we have now 5 minutes. So Donna and Mila, get the ball rolling. We have 5 minutes left and we should stop in 2 hours because we could go on talking forever. It's so good.
Did you want to say something?
I don't feel a need particularly to add because I've been rambling and adding some things in the chat. We can never feel finished with this. There's so many, it's fractal-like, right? There's so many aspects and I just keep going and. I would love to hear, I've already said, if there's time to hear from Steve and certainly from you, Mila, if you've got some things you want to plop in and anybody.
What you are saying is a testimony to how much we want to share of ourselves. And where is the technology that has been already invented for that? And what is it co-opted for? I have a message. I feel moved to share a message for everybody that AI is coming, singularity is coming, and our technological innovations are going ahead of our consciousness development. And that is the self-tripping mechanism. And in the singularity, guess what the paradox and the reversal is going to happen? It is, we are all going to matter. We are all going to be validated, but for whom and for what? So your information, your personality, your biomaterial is going to be important. And it's going to feed into this massive centralization of all of our coding. So what is the reversal for that? What is the mirroring of that? Is my message to every single one of us, not here, but out there. You matter. You actually have value that something or somebody else may monetize in a regressive way, in a greedy way. You matter. I see you. You are valued. You matter to me. You matter for us. And all of those that have been disenfranchised may be enfranchised by unconscious regressive technology, which we cannot allow to happen. And we can discuss more of this. So what we need is an empathetic revolution in arts and culture coding. If there is anything we've learned from the virus, please let us not have this crisis be missed. The intelligence in the virus is also the pathway to sharing ourselves, the way it has multiplied, is not to separate us, but to bring us closer. So for that, ethics and aesthetics will be the cultural code that should be virally shared for being, becoming, and in belonging. So in that sense, maybe the people that I would love to honor today is the Himba people from Namibia, who you have all heard have a practice that the child has a particular song that is sung to the child. And if the child misbehaves, or if the person commits an error of any kind against their own humanity, the villagers come around the person and sing their song back to them. You are good, you are valued, you matter, you are important to me, you are important for us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mila. To capture your words, we don't need to create just a sustainable world. We need to create a sustainable, humane world. And we are losing our humanity when AI and robotics and all this digitization comes in. And the world needs to awaken, but everybody is on the bandwagon of getting on the digital step. And you look at developing countries which are copying online shopping, when it's a pleasure to go in the streets of Mumbai and buy vegetables from a farmer vendor. But you do this in New York, you go to the weekend market, you do it in Vienna, and yet we are turning developing countries into supermarkets which nobody wants. So anyway, let's create a sustainable, humane world for all.
Steve.
Thank you. We have reached exactly 2 hour point. And if everybody agrees, thank you so much for being part of this. And we want to march with you ahead in the next 4 or 5 webinars. We have the 4 webinars, and we want to build this community for change by picking up Rio 92 and celebrating Rio Plus 30. And really, until and unless we have a new agenda for the world, let's not throw away the baby with the bathwater. Thank you.
Just one last statement.
Thank you.
Please check
Thanks,
on the
guys.
website, airforsea.org.
Ciao.
Please, guys, check the website, airforsea.org. We're going to put some information about the documentary there from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Download the chat so that you can keep track of what's been said. I just posted a little poem that was created in Bali by me and co-created by Mahendra. So just as a little reminder, and we will carry on with our journey.
Is Steve still with us? He had something very personal to share. I think it's important to all of us.
No, he's gone.
Oh.
Maybe I say one word about building and dancing. We came to architects and then to mental architects. I think we have to really embody. And the real good system scientists were also architects. So please go with me between the points and between the fields to see the commons, like we try with Jörg, with the young people, getting an awareness of scales, proportions, consequences, as filmmakers in between, just looking for the bigger picture and negotiating the picture and not being stuck in words. And one last word, maybe everybody can write down his concrete proposals, which were asked in the questions, because that I think is important, that we can follow up on that.
Thank you. So,
okay.
Everyone, you are still in the afternoon, most of you, but here midnight is coming soon. So maybe close the webinar now and prepare for our webinar the day after.
See you on the 7th if you like to come. Okay.
Thank you so much.